Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the CEO of the Niti Aayog, Mr. BVR Subramanyam, who's had quite a harrowing morning trying to get from Delhi to Mumbai today because we've had technical glitches at the Delhi airport, which has led to significant delays. So thank you for braving all of that, Mr. Subramanyam, and still being here with us at the Global Leadership Summit. You know, I want to pick up where Niall Ferguson left off, and he said that we're living in a world where India, in his words, quote unquote, cannot be polyamorous anymore. You will have to pick a side, you will have to make a choice. Is it the US or is it the BRICS? I want to understand from you, do you see this as a choice that India will be forced to make as well, given what President Trump and the Trump administration has decided to do?
So I think that's a very, a very one-sided view which I heard just now. I think the situation is a bit more complex. Let me take a minute or two just to explain. Just look, there were a lot of certainties since the Second World War. You had a Washington consensus, you had a consensus on free trade, you had the WTO, you had a general belief in multilateralism. All the certainties seem to be going. So the world is in flux. What does that mean? It means you just look at it economically. You see a world where trade is flat, FDI is flat or declining. The world doesn't know how to handle this. And what we are actually heading for is a world where low growth is a norm. We were growing at about 3.5%, 3.7% trend globally before COVID. But in the last few years, the trend seems to be sub 3%, and that's what it's going to be. And in all this, India is a standout case. I mean, it's the brightest spot in the global economy, and that's what makes it important in the context of what you asked. It's bright because it's got size, it's got a market, and it's got innovation talent. Given that, I think India will be a pole which will attract everybody else. So rather than us being forced to make choices, others will be compelled to actually reach out to India. And I think that's the sweet spot India is in. So it's not necessary for India to take sides. People will cut their own cloth to adjust to India. I think that is what it is. I think, and I think that's the way the government is actually moving. That we have, and there's another thing. We are doing good. And we are doing very good because there are strong inherent strengths. And I think if you have to live in the slightly more turbulent times, be it war, be it economy, be it tariffs, build up your internal strengths. The more you build up your internal strengths, the more the world will actually look at you far more favorably. You will be compelled to make far fewer tough choices.
Well, one tough choice, of course, at this point in time that we know that we're grappling with is, of course, how do you engage and how do you deal with the US? The US has put forward what it wants India to do, especially as far as Russian crude, etc. is concerned, and we've made our position known, and we've hopefully made our position understood as well. But given the almost sort of, it's an unyielding peace at this point in time, how do you see this playing itself out in the long term?
So I think things have been a bit difficult with the United States. And I think a reset is being tried. The trade negotiations are on. I wouldn't like to preempt anybody. Hopefully, end of the month, we may hear some news on that front. Having said that, what the US government is saying and what the US corporates are saying are totally different. You are still continuing to have the steady stream of foreign investors coming to India. You've got American companies opening global capability centers in India. You don't see anybody lessening their importance being given to India. So that basically means the fundamental attraction of India will trump everything else.
Will trump everything else. That certainly is the hope, and that does deserve a round of applause as well here for Mr. Subramanyam. But, Mr. Subramanyam, irrespective of what finally happens as far as the India-US bilateral trade agreement is concerned, you've always been a very firm believer in the fact that India must actually cut its tariffs, that it's in India's interest to bring down its tariffs.
So, there are a couple of things. Let me elaborate a bit. We want to be a Vikasit Bharat, which means we want to be a developed nation. If we want to be a developed nation, we must have a long-term goal which has been set. The Honorable Prime Minister had made it very clear. We should be a $30 trillion economy, $18,000 by 47. There are some principles which we should not forego, irrespective of what happens. Number one, don't forego openness. You need to be a world-class country irrespective of how anybody else behaves. I mean, just because there are tariffs in one part of the world, the rest of the world hasn't changed its behavior. I mean, you still have a COP going on next week, irrespective of somebody not joining it. So I think the importance of that is something we need to realize, openness. Second, we need to be a leader in green transition and addressing, the clean energy transition. Extremely important. They're a core principle. And the third one, focus on our people, focus on our strengths. That means invest in people. As long as you invest in people, I think you're pretty good.
And to the point that you made that India must remain open for the benefit of the people who are watching. Last night, the finance minister in a conversation also mentioned that India's Atmanirbharta policy should not be seen as an isolationist policy. And that's the point that's being made here by you as well, Mr. Subramanyam. But, Niall Ferguson was also talking about the low-hanging fruits that India must address in order for us to be able to do the 8 to 10% growth ambition aspiration that we have to fulfill. Now, from Niti Aayog's perspective, given where we find ourselves today, domestically as well as globally, what would you prioritize?
Okay. So, look, this is a country whose fundamentals are very good. Fiscal prudence is there, inflation is under control, demography is in our favor, and I think that's okay. So what do we need to do? We need to do a couple of important transitions, and I think that's priority. First, we need to make a transition from agriculture to industry. I think that's long pending. A lot of emphasis has been given in the recent past, PLIs, this, that. But I think the transition to manufacturing of two types, high-tech advanced manufacturing on one end and labor-intensive manufacturing. One takes you to the cutting edge of the world economy, the other creates jobs. That's absolutely important. And I think that was the biggest announcement in the last budget, which is the National Manufacturing Mission. And I'm hopeful that by the end of November, the mission will be up and running. The NMM is going to transform India's manufacturing landscape. It's going to be a very different approach, quite different, not throwing money alone, but actually focusing on building capabilities. So that's one. And the second thing is, we think of services as just restricted to the IT sector. Services in India have become synonymous with IT. Services are more than 150 sectors, You're in the service sector.
Yes.
And this is also an area, because services have one advantage. Services are people-driven. It's a great employment generator. If you look at it globally, only 30% of Indians work in the service sector. It's 60% of our economy. So this is where we need to grow, which means what? Education, healthcare, professional services, entertainment, transportation, all this tourism. This is huge. And I think we have barely scratched the potential. And that's the other area of focus, which means what? Services means people. Invest in their training, improve their talent, make them high-tech, and that's when you become global. So manufacturing and services and the transition from agriculture, I think, are the big bets for India to become Viksit Bharat.
Let me pick up on the headline that you gave us, that the National Manufacturing Mission is going to be rolled out at the end of the month. And that's a big one, because that's something that we've all been waiting for. You also said that it's not just an issue of throwing capital at the problem, that we will have to reimagine the way that we look at the manufacturing sector. Leave us, I don't know how much you can share with us by way of details ahead of the launch itself, but what is going to change for Indian manufacturing? I ask you this in the context of the fact that for over 10 years, more than that, we've been talking about going from 15% to 25% manufacturing share to GDP. Will that finally happen?
So actually, let me tell you, manufacturing has had some remarkable successes in the last few years. And we have learned in the process. I mean, mobile phones is a success. There are a couple of areas where there have been successes. We have also learned from where we haven't succeeded as much as we wish to. The first thing which we have learned in, say, mobile phones, is you can't bet on a product. You need to bet on the entire ecosystem. So that's one thing. So you need to have an electronics ecosystem. You need to have a pharma ecosystem. You need to have an ecosystem for semiconductors. So there's a whole range of ecosystem stuff, number one. Number two, don't spread yourself too thin. Focus on specific areas, which means focus on clusters. Pick up 15 sectors, pick up 5 clusters for each, 75 locations which are going to be global in size, capability, and actually employment. I think that's the buzzword. When China began, it began with one cluster. And once that succeeded, they just replicated it. We're just going to do something like that. Pick up clusters, pick up areas which you want to focus on, where you have inherent strengths, which are demonstrated or can have strength, and then Put everything you have in it, like not just money, skilling. You need people around. If somebody asks, why do you make a siting decision for a factory? They don't do it just because there's a market. They look, where do I have talent? I mean, day before yesterday, I was in Bangalore at a skills summit, and what were they talking about? Bangalore is a destination not because it has the best incentives. Everybody else gives best incentives. What they say is, Bangalore has the talent. And I think that's the primary thing in today's work when you want advanced manufacturing. So this cluster-based approach is going to be the key to manufacturing, but cluster-based across the ecosystem. And I think that's the big thing, and I'm very hopeful. There's another thing that's happening. We must understand that the manufacturing space is being vacated by many countries. China is vacating a lot of manufacturing space. There are other countries who are filling it in. So I think there's a huge potential. And what is the potential arising out of? It's arising out of our demography. We have a 1 billion strong workforce. That is the biggest workforce in the world. I mean, 2/3 of Indians are in the workforce, 65%. That's huge. So you just need to create an ecosystem which can absorb this workforce. You create jobs, you create economic growth.
You know, I'm going to push you a little bit on that. So you talked about clusters, and what we have seen successfully as perhaps one of India's post-liberalization success stories is what we've seen with the auto ancillary sector and with the auto sector. What are the 5 champion sectors, if I may ask you, you believe we should bet on from this cluster approach that you speak of?
Okay, so that I would categorize these into 3 groups. There would be one where we are already global players. There are another group of sectors where we have some strengths, but we are not yet there. And there are some where we need to be because they're important. We're probably going to pick up equal number of sectors from each, 4 to 5 in each of them. So if you look at areas where we have inherent strengths, and we are already globally strong, automobile certainly is one of them. Pharma is going to be the other. On the labor-intensive side, textiles and garments is the other, and also leather, footwear, etc. 2 are labor-intensive, 2 are going to be capital-intensive. If you're looking at areas where we have some skills, but we are not yet there, we're not global or world-class, capital goods is one. I mean, that's something where we need to be there. You can go through and you will see there are many, many areas where we are just about there, but not, champions. And there are some futuristic sectors, be it, semiconductors, be it EVs, be it other stuff, be it transportation, robotics, we need to be there. So there'll be a pretty decent selection of areas, and I'm sure this NMM is going to be the transformative lever. It's going to be our big bet.
It's going to be our big bet, the new national manufacturing mission, as is being articulated here by Mr. Subramanyam. But, I want to go back to the first point that you made, that we're living in a world where trade is flat, where FDI is flat. Now, India has been trying to draw in foreign direct investment across different sectors, from semiconductors to AI and so on and so forth. Given the fact that there is this global uncertainty and nervousness which seems to be impacting FDI, what worries you about our potential to grow at the rates at which we aspire without the requisite amount of FDI?
So, I think this is going to be a topmost priority. Firstly, we need sustained growth of 8 to 9% for about 25 years. That itself is a big challenge.
Are we on the cusp of that?
We are on the verge. We're doing the right things. I think from next year onwards, we should be touching those kind of numbers. I think that's the goal. And I think the policy levers are being tweaked, number one. If you're going to have 8 to 9% growth, I mean, even if you have a capital output ratio of 4, you need 35, 36% of investment every year. We are not yet there. We're around 30, 31%, and it's been a bit flat at that. That additional 4 to 5% investment has 2 parts to the problem. One is, I think the government has been doing a lot. A lot of capex has been going. Households have been doing a lot. People have been buying houses, building stuff, etc. I think the private sector capex cycle needs to kick off. And one good thing is, thanks to the cut in GST, the GST festival that has happened, the reduction in income tax rates, the exemption limits being raised, I think more money is being put in pockets. You're going to see a boost in that. So that's the second. So the investment cycle needs to kick off. But on the other side, domestic capital is not going to be enough. So out of that 35, 36% that we need, 3 to 4% has to come from outside. We have touched 3 to 4% long ago. But that was a much smaller economy. Yeah. So 3% of a $4 trillion economy is quite different from 3% of a $300 billion.
So would you consider this one of your biggest worries today?
This is the one of the biggest areas of focus where we need to be actually kicking up our FDI dramatically, and that's it. And the good thing is, you got all the major multinationals in the world looking at India, thanks to the uncertainties. There are companies which are just wanting to shift operations from one country to the other. What does this mean from us? They're interested in India for two reasons. Domestic market, and we are one of the best low-cost destinations for manufacture. Having said that, we need to cut our paperwork. We need to cut our bureaucracy. The Prime Minister keeps talking about, minimum government, maximum governance, ease of doing business. Get out of the way of business. Make life easy. We don't want people to fly in with interest and fly back disappointed.
How much are we still in the way, though?
So, this is the other area on which a lot of work is happening. If you actually tick the boxes on reforms, Government of India has probably done 90-95% of it. Take the Income Tax Act. It's about two-thirds the size of what it was earlier. 90% of the work now is left in the states. So we have a task force under the Cabinet Secretary. He is pushing day to day, without publicity, reforms at the state level. Every day I'm seeing some news item. For example, you want to convert agricultural land to industrial land, you need 1,000 permission. Andhra has just gone ahead and removed that permission. So it's a major transformation. I mean, why can't I be allowed to use the land the way I want it to be used? So a lot is happening on that. So I think the PM has been very clear, reforms, reforms. Cabinet Secretary working with states. We have two committees in Niti Aayog. One of them, by the former Cabinet Secretary, is called the High-Level Committee on Non-Financial Sector Reforms. They are focusing only on cutting down paperwork and waste. The first report covered three areas: environment, MSMEs, and the whole area about restrictions in manufacturing, etc. They're not public documents, but I'm seeing coverage in some papers. But even if half of them get done, that's going to be transformative. They're going to add 1% or 2% to India's growth.
But why haven't we seen them being done, and when do you hope that they will be done?
No, I think we shouldn't, I don't think there's any need to be sorry, because the reports have just gone out in October. So we're just about 4 weeks away from it. I think there's very high level attention. The highest level attention is being paid to that. So I foresee in a month or two, much before the budget, some of these things happening. I think the systems are working full time. You go to Delhi, nobody is asleep. They're working 24/7.
Well, that's the other big headline that's coming in there from the Niti Aayog CEO, that the reports, high-level committee reports on the ease of doing business across different sectors will be made public and will, of course, be part of the execution roadmap even ahead of the budget. But, sir, you talked about FDI, and you said that drawing in FDI should be the biggest focus area. For this audience here, FPI flows is another big focus area, and the Indian markets have not seen the kind of FPI flows that we would have liked to have seen. And one of the aspects being talked about is the capital gains tax. Do you believe that there is a need, or this is the right time to review that?
I will put it that way. Global capital falls on the portfolio side happen for a lot of reasons. It's not just your performance, it's all relative. China suddenly became less attractive, a lot of capital came back to India. The China story changes, you will see capital moving out again. So I think there are larger things that are happening there. But I think the intrinsic worth of India as a destination for portfolio capital, I think, continues to exist. There are two things, however. You are having a huge boom and spurt in domestic capital flowing into the markets. I mean, so one of the reasons that in spite of FPI not happening in the same extent, markets have taken it quite well, is domestic capital is replacing foreign capital. Having said that, I think one area where there is huge scope for foreign capital come to India is, patient capital, what I call pension funds, insurance funds. They need to come into India on a much larger scale. I mean, take InvITs, for example, infrastructure investment trusts. I mean, the NHAI has one InvIT, which is a public sector InvIT. They should be pushing for more private sector InvITs, and I think that's going to happen in the next year or two. There's going to be a lot of asset monetization from the government. That should be moved into the private space. These are the kind of assets which are not greenfield, they're brownfield. They're the ones which will attract patient capital. So I think the Canadians are in India in a big way. They've put a lot of money in the Indian market. But in large areas, London, New York, their funds are not yet in India on that scale. And I think there is a need to, create enough products where they can put money, number one. Number two, it's not the rate of tax per se, but there are a lot of nitty-gritty things on the tax side which need to be resolved. I mean, Niti Aayog has a consultative group on tax policy. They have submitted 2 reports to the government, one on permanent establishment, the other one was on criminalization. Hopefully they are going to be seen. It's got representatives from the finance ministry in that. We're going to come out with a dozen more reports in the next 2 months. So the whole idea is, it's not about tax rates. It's about tax administration. If you improve that, I think there will be a lot of... It's not the rate which is bothering, it's the uncertainty of interpretation which is bothering people. If you have certainty on interpretation, I think much more capital will flow in.
Mr. Subramanyam, you've given us a long list of things that are work in progress and hopefully will get done. What's, if I may ask you, you believe the single biggest priority that you believe Niti needs to focus on, and through Niti or via Niti, the government needs to get done?
I've already spoken about manufacturing. Let me say one thing. When everybody looks at India, they're looking at the market. What do you mean by market? Market is people. So the strength of India is its demography. And if India has to become Vikasit Bharat, these people have to be skilled, educated, and they should have productive livelihoods. I think that's priority number one. If I was asked to put money, and at just 1 rupee, I'll put it on skilling and education. On average, an Indian student goes to school for 67 years. South Koreans go for 13 to 14 years. That's the level of gap that we need to bridge. 4% of our industrial workforce is skilled. You want them to make high-tech stuff, you want them to be doing robotics. With 4% having skills, it's not adequate. Invest money in skilling. So Niti is actually working very hard. How do I improve the skilling ecosystem? How do I integrate it with the education system? Don't make it an extracurricular activity. Yeah. Skilling is, education is skilling. It's just a different path. And make them all interoperable and carry it all the way to graduation. We probably roll it out in 2 states, Andhra and Orissa to begin with. Hopefully it works, roll out in the rest of the country. I think that's the key to the future. If you have 1 billion people who are highly skilled, the foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, all of that will come.
Well, that's the other headline. Skilling is education, and that is what Niti is trying to push forward. Let me end by asking you, sir, we started by talking about the so-called polyamorous relationship. Let's bring China into the conversation as well. Re-engagement has started. Flights have restarted. Visas are being issued at this point in time. How do you see this relationship progressing, given the backdrop of what has happened in the past, but more importantly, looking into the future?
Look, the large economies in the world are important. So we will end up having some economic relation with them. If that country is 20% of the world economy, you can't shut off 20% of the world economy. That's reality. Whether we like it or not, maybe it's not a choice. They still end up being the largest, import source for us. That's because of the capabilities they have built up. So I think we will be engaging with them, but we need to keep 2-3 things in mind. A, when the Prime Minister talks about Swadeshi and Ardha Nirbharta, he's not talking of protectionism. What he is talking about is, secure yourself from surprises. See that not you're self-sufficient, but you're self-reliant when necessary. I think if we keep that at the back of the mind, we can engage with anybody, be it a friend, somebody who's not so friendly, we will be able to do that. I think we need to de-risk our engagements. We can't allow our dependency on another country beyond a point. And that's a lesson we have learned in the recent past particularly. Don't be over-dependent. And since you said it's the last question, I go back to just one point which I think is very important for India as a nation. If we have to become a great nation, it will be on our skills, our talent, our workforce, our manufacturing, our services. We need to grow them. And we need to grow them fast. We don't have much time. We have just 20 years, 25 years to do it. The world is going to change. And the problem is going to be, in 25 years, we are also going to be older. Our median age today is 29. In 25 years, we'll be 39. So the big thing is, grow rich before you grow old. And I think that is the vision driving Vikasit Bharat. Vikasit Bharat is not a choice. It is essential because only then will India grow rich, and we need to grow rich before we grow old, because simultaneously India is also aging. We have crossed the total fertility rate of 2.1. Indian population is going to peak in another 10 years. So it's important that we focus on becoming a rich nation pretty fast. There are others who have not managed it. They are in trouble. Thank you.
Become a rich nation before we become an old nation. BVR Subramanyam, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here at the CNBC-TV18 Global Leadership Summit and really laying out the roadmap across a whole host of sectors, a whole host of areas that India must prioritize. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Subramanyam, and thank you, Shereen, for that insightful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, one huge round of applause once again, please. And with that, we wrap up our morning sessions. Join us after lunch